Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Beitzah Daf Chavches. Begin on the top line of the Yomig. We continue to halacha. The next Mishnah continue on this theme about meat of an animal on Yom Tov. Today's Daf. So as we discussed in today's Daf are the laws related to preparing meat for Yom Tov. How can you go ahead and weigh them and different things? Laws related to taking kli on Yom Tov, such as sharpening knives. Whether one may show a shchita knife to a chacham on Yom Tov. Machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the chacham, whether shiur echel nefesh or permit on Yom Tov, which is a classic machlekes. So the key terms of accounts are going to happen in today's daf are psula hamagdashim, which that's our karbanis which became invalidated, and then it's permitted for regular use when you redeem it. Uvdin nechayil is one of the general types of prohibitions to be done on Shabbos and Yom Tov, where it's like a type of weekday, a vachandiga type of activity that is forbidden. Machshir echel nefesh is those which is, we know for Yom Tov, you're allowed to do echel nefesh, you're allowed to go ahead and do malacha for food. Machshir echel nefesh is a machlekes regarding what's with the preparatory, like fixing the knife, which is not the food itself, but it helps you for the food, if that's considered permitted to be done in Yom Tov or not. Halacha be'American is like halacha concept that sometimes the halacha could be one thing, but you don't rule like that in public. And bedikas sak and shchita is regarding this halacha that before you do the shchita, you have to go and check the knife, take the fingernail, go over the chalaf to make sure that it's an appropriate knife. So we begin the current daf. The Mishnah begins. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer. He says, "Sheikel adam basar," a person, a butcher who's selling meat by weight. Although you're not allowed to weigh with literal, let's say with weights themselves, because that's like what's called ma'isa chayil. It's a uvdin nechol. It's a weekly type of a thing. So you're not allowed to weigh it, but he's permitted to weigh it keneged hakli. Let's say on the other side of the scale of the meat is, let's say, like you have in this picture, type of a knife or something like that, or keneged like a kli or keneged a kafetz. Like this would be the cleaver. It's a large knife which the butchers use to cut the meat because it's a shinoi. It's doing something differently, so it's not considered a ma'aseh. It's not a weekday type of activity. That's how Rabbi Yehuda holds. The Chachamim say no. We don't look at bekaf meiznayim in the pan of the scales. Kol ikar at all. You don't use the scale on Yom Tov at all. So the Gemara says that my kol ikar. What does it mean? Not at all. What is it? What does it come into when it says kol ikar? Just say it's usher. Why do you have to say that you don't look at it at all? Rabbi Shloimy says it means afil l'shomer minach barim. It says even to go ahead as this nice picture which most women would get scared watching this shiur, which has this nice little mouse. Even to protect it from the mice, you're not allowed to put the meat on the scale because it hangs up high on the peg. Even for that, you're saying you don't look at the scale at all. So not only can you not weigh on it, you can't even use it at all. Which I'm going to read about often. He says, but b'hu d'talia b'trita. This is specifically if the scale is hanging from a certain ring, which they would hang it from when they would weigh it. Which, because it looks like that you're weighing, even if you're doing it just to keep it away from the mice, that's what the Chachamim say, kol ikar, that you can't use the scale at all. Now, continuing on this halacha, Rabbi Yehuda Mashmul, another teaching from the same Amayra, Rabbi Yehuda named Mashmul, says, Tabach Uman. He says a professional butcher, who he knows how to weigh things in his hands. So he's asal lishkol basa b'yad. He's not allowed to weigh meat even in his hands, because what does he do? He holds a weight in one hand. He holds meat in the other hand. He goes, He feels, oh yeah. He knows it's precise, and he's weighing it. Because in the weekday, since he's such a professional, he does it like that, even like that too. So that's considered ma'aseh chayil of the butcher. Similarly, another teaching from Rabbi Yehuda Mashmul, he says, Tabach Uman, a professional butcher, asal lishkol basa b'mayim. Which are very like schmack pictures we had so far. It's just pointing that out. That's all. Just fun to look at. But it's forbidden for a professional butcher to weigh the meat in water, meaning in the cup, in the receptacle. There's markings in the vessel. And you put in water, and the markers identify how much water is going up because of the weight of the meat, which you already know those are certain amounts of weight. Again, you can't do that. It's the same thing. It's considered a ma'aseh chol. Now, concerning this halacha of meat on Yom Tov, so Rav Chia Ba'ashi says, "Asalas is beis yad b'basar." You're not allowed to make a hole, like a handle, in the meat to grab a hold of. Which Amar Ravina, however, says ubiyad shari. He says by hand you're allowed to. In other words, you're allowed to take your finger and stick a hole and that's permitted because that's not derechol. It's not like, again, these are all shmuzin like uvdin dechol, maisachol, derechol. Now, with a knife, that's how you would do during the weekday, because when they would sell meat, they would make like a type of a handle, which it's easier for the consumer to take it home. So actually, the meat itself is taking the flesh, no bags. When they're going to ban all our bags, all our plastic bags, go to the meat store, so they make a hole in the piece of meat, and you carry it like that. Now, on Yom Tov, you have to do epis hashina. You have to do it so it's recognizable, because, again, you don't do regular business as usual. So therefore, although you don't make a handle, but Ravina says, but if you do it by hand, then it's permitted. Similarly, Amar Abuna says, you're allowed to make a sign in the piece of meat that the one who's carrying it shouldn't mix up. He says, okay, which one's going to Schwartzberg, which one's going to Stein, which is going, like, not to get mixed up. You're allowed to make a sign. Like actually, Rabbi Avuna, actually, like, he used to do this thing itself, that when he would send meat to his house, he would cut it on 3 corners, meaning he would make it like Rashi has the picture, a triangle, like a hamantash, to 3 corners, which his family members already knew. Okay, this is what Tati does. This is his sign of that he's that it came from him. And again, so that sign you let him make that on Yom Tov. Now, continuing regarding this halacha of weighing on Yom Tov, who when they would divide meat amongst themselves, certain people that always go out to eat together. You know what I'm saying? They always let's share. Let's chip in. And put on my credit card next to your credit. So when they would go ahead and divide meat amongst themselves, these two Talmidei Chacham, shoiklin mana. So they would weigh that mana, keneged mana b'Yom Tov. So when they were eating on Yom Tov together, they would go ahead and weigh one mana opposite the other one. Says, well, come on, who's that like? Like Rabbi Yehuda, like Rabbanan. Meaning, Ikar Rabbi Yehuda was like Rabbi Yehuda of our Mishnah. Hamei said, shekel adam basa keneged akli keneged akleifetz. He only said that you could weigh it, the piece of meat, opposite a vessel or opposite a cleaver, which sounds like keneged akli in. Yes, opposite a vessel, because it's not normal during the weekday, but sounds like keneged mida achrini, but opposite another mana, another piece of meat, which that's how people usually weigh. You don't have to take necessarily weight. You take another equivalent piece of meat and you weigh that. Then you're not allowed to do that. So how did Reb Chia and Reb Shimon Berebi do this on Yom Tov when they would divide the meat? And he could have done it. It's like Dabbanan, forget about it. I mean, they say we don't look at a scale at all. So B'shui not to weigh one piece of meat opposite another piece of meat. Says the Gemara, you're right. They weren't like either one of the Tanam of our Mishnah. In the David Rabbi Yeshua, they actually did like Rabbi Yeshua. The time like learn the Brayso, Rabbi Yeshua, he says, he disagrees with the Tanam of our Mishnah. You could weigh not opposite a weight itself, but another piece of meat that's equivalent. You could weigh one opposite the other one. Now, Amar Rabbi Yisrael says, Halach Rabbi Yeshua. Halach is actually like Rabbi Yeshua, which is not like either one of the Tanam of our Mishnah. Why? Because we learned in the Mishnah in Bechayres, like Rabbi Yeshua, that the Mishnah there is discussing, you're not allowed to weigh and sell a bechor that's blemished, that the kohen shechted, with a litra. Why can't you do it with a litra? Because you're not supposed to do, and this is a similar but different halacha, a ma'aseh choil by kudshim. It's disgraceful. You can't just sell kudshim, even though it's psulei mikdashim, even though it's available blemish. But the Mishnah teach over there, but not mana keneged mana, which is, let's say you already know how much the first piece of meat weighed, and now you're weighing another piece opposite that piece. Oh, that's permitted, because obviously you see that's not uvdid dechayel. He doesn't consider that as a weekday activity, a mundane activity with the kudshim meat. It's not like we learned over there in the Mishnah, which that's what we're quoting here is the end of the Mishnah. Rashi says the beginning of that Mishnah says over there that all psulei mikdashim are karbanos that became invalidated, and then you redeem it. So the psulei mikdashim, the beginning of that Mishnah says, could be sold in the marketplace, and they could be weighed with a litra, except for bechor and meiser. Why would that be different than all other karbanos? Because the benefit of its sale goes to its owners. In contrast, as our Gemara quotes from the Mishnah, the psulei mikdashim, when you have a carbon that became invalidated, hana asan lahektish, the benefit goes to hektish, because all karbanos that are blemished, the halacha is you're allowed to redeem it when it gets blemished. Now, even though it really retains some sanctity, because What do you mean sanctities? Because you're actually still not allowed to, the animal that became blemished, although you're not going to bring it as a carbon wool, you're not allowed to shear its wool. Shear meaning to cut off the wool. You're not allowed to work with it, as the Gemara teaches. It says tizbach, you could slaughter it. But like gizi, you cannot be shearing the wool. Even so, you could still go ahead and treat it in the chulin way, and to shecht it in the marketplace, and to sell it in the marketplace, and to weigh it with a litra, except for b'char meiser. Because by b'char meiser, the benefit of selling it for a higher price, because if you could sell it in the marketplace, you're going to get more than if you sell it in your house. That benefit doesn't go to hektish, it goes only to the owners. Why? Why is that? Because there's no redemption of a b'char and a meiser when it becomes blemished, that its value should go to hektish. Because by b'char it says lo tifte, and by meiser it says lo yigal. The only thing what happens is when it becomes blemished, the owner could eat it in its blemished state. So therefore, there we don't let you do like a mundane type of activity in when you're selling its meat, when it develops a blemish and you're shechting, and the owners are shechting it, where the owner of the b'char is the kohen, the owner of the meiser is the yisrael. In contrast, by other b'sulam mikdashim, the benefit of selling for a higher price goes to hektish, which actually Rashi explains why. Because even though it's really redeemed already, whoever bought it already bought it before shechted, because before redeeming it, it's not shechted, because it actually requires hamad baruch. You actually have to evaluate it, and you could only redeem it based on that pricing when it's still alive. Even so, it says Rashi, at some level, there is benefit for the selling of a higher price to hektish. Why? Because since you know that you're going to be able to ultimately redeem it, sell it in the marketplace, so initially when the guy's buying it, even when it's still alive, he's going to give a higher price because he knows the resale value is that much greater, so he's going to add on the pidyon initially. Therefore, we allow you to disgrace on some level the kachim to sell it in the market, because that's where everyone goes to buy the meat. But by b'char we don't let you, because b'char the hektish kachim, the base of is not getting that benefit. The buy so we weren't going to be makel. But says the Mishnah, v'shoikel mana keneged mana b'b'char. Although we told you that you can't sell it in the market, you can't sell it by weight, but when you're selling it in your house, not in the market, you could do it with one piece of meat, weighing it opposite another piece of meat. So obviously that such a case is not considered as a mundane weighing. So therefore, says Rabbi Yosef, you see how is like a Bishua, not like the Tanam of our Mishnah, that mana keneged mana, which was what Reb Chia and Reb Shimon Rebbe did, is not considered ovdin dechayil, because if would, you wouldn't be able to do that with the b'char. And therefore, the same thing is regarding Yom Tov. You're allowed to do it because it's not ovdin dechayil. Although they're two very different halachas, they both have that you're not do mundane activity with it. So Abai rejects the raya of Rabbi Yosef. He says no. The dimalahi, maybe it's not the case. Maybe the Rabbanan of B'chairis don't hold like Rabbi Yeshua by Yom Tov. And maybe Yeshua does not hold like B'char that it's going to be permitted. Meaning you can't necessarily compare these two sugyas of Rabbi Yeshua here in B'char to that of here of regarding Yom Tov, to Rabbi Yeshua over there to that Mishnah in Mesechtes B'char, to the Rabbanan over there. Why? Because it says Ad can come Rabbi Yeshua. Where do we find Rabbi Yeshua in our sugya? Meaning he's in the Bryce over here, but he's in our sugya of regarding the animals on Yom Tov, regarding if you could weigh a piece opposite another piece, that's on Yom Tov. Because Ela Deleka B'Zayin Kachim, because there's no disgrace to Kachim, it's not Kachim, it's on Yom Tov. So okay, so you can be shekel money, connected money, because it's not the way you normally do it during the weekday. Abel Hassan Dika B'Zayin Kadishim, but there in the case of the Mishnah Mesechtes B'chayres, where it's a disgrace to Kachim, where you're taking the B'chayr and you're going to be selling it in money connected money, lie. Who said that Rabbi Shua would hold like that Mishnah? You're trying to bring me a right Rabbi Shua from that Mishnah. I can tell you Rabbi Shua wouldn't even hold like that Mishnah. And so to the other way around too. Inami, you're also Adkan L'Kam Rabban Hassan. Where do we find the Rabban over there? Meaning, in the Mishnah Mesechtes B'chayres that let you go ahead and weigh the B'chayr that you had a blemish. And Mana Keneged Mana, is because it doesn't appear to be doing a weekly type of activity. Meaning, there by B'chayr is a sale. And yeah, it's not the normal to weigh meat that you're selling mana keneged mana. So it doesn't look like the way you normally do in the weekday. Normally in the weekday, if you'd be selling a b'chayr, you wouldn't do it mana keneged mana. Meaning not weekday, meaning mundane. Meaning in contrast to kachim, which is what the b'chayr is. But here by Reb Shimon Rebbe, the Mechzi Kub and the Chol, where they're dividing meat on Yom Tov. that looks like a weekday type of a thing, because that's how people usually, when they're dividing meat, they would weigh and say, okay, let's put it on. Your piece of meat, my piece of meat. Oh, yours going a little bit lower, like the kids do with the grape juice on Shabbos. They're like, wait, oh, okay, now it's good. That light. No, maybe the Rabban Masechet B'Charetz would not hold over that halacha of Rabbi Shua, and they would hold it forbidden to weigh a mana keneged mana, and therefore says Abai is no raya that the halacha is like Rabbi Shua, who Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon Rebbe were going like, because there were two different sugyas. One would maybe be mutter by one and not by the other. But then the Gemara, once it introduced that what Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon Rebbe would do when they would divide it, that they would weigh it, and we were discussing how could they weigh it, we said they go like Rabbi Shua. Says the Gemara, I don't understand the story. Remember the Kapdei Adadi, is that really to say that Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon Rebbe, when they would divide the meat, they would weigh it, and they were, because they were very particular, like the kids, like we said, they weigh it exactly, they look exactly. But according to the contrary, we always ask our kids to be mavatir, and they were totally mavatir. They would look the other way, and they would take from one to the other out of friendship, and they wouldn't be so particular. And he says, you know how I can prove this? Because Bahanu Sheb Benisam, there was these 7 fish, the Asal Beit Rebbe, a fish platter of 7 types of fish came to the household of Rebbe, which was Reb Shimon Rebbe's father. And guess what? The 5 out of the 7 fishes ended up in Rechia's house. He brought it to his house. Well, I covered Reb Shimon Rebbe. Shimon, son of Rebbe, said, Tati, why is he? What I mean, it's our fish platter, and Rechia, he has 5 out of the 7. No, he didn't say it's my father's actually, and he's getting more than me. So you see, he wasn't particular. So how can we even understand this whole derivative of this halacha that we're trying to say, that they were particular, money connected mana, but say they weren't particular. So Rav Papa says you're right. Reb Chia and Reb Shimon Rebbe and the household of Rebbe, they weren't particular. But rather Shadi Gavar Benai, this that we said that there would be shekel money connected mana, you have to stick in a different person. Reb Chia, Reb Shmuel Rebbe. So either keep Reb Chia, but it wasn't Reb Shimon Rebbe, it was actually Reb Shmuel Rebbe. Or keep Reb Shimon Rebbe, and the other one wasn't Reb Chia, it was Ubar Kapara. When they would divide, they were accustomed to go ahead and take one with the other and see mana connected mana, and that's who we're talking about, because Reb Chia and Reb Shimon Rebbe were not particular. You know, I look in the next Mishnah, continue regarding preparing food on Yom Tov. How far does that go? So it says the Mishnah, Emash Chizin Esasakim Yom Tov. You now go ahead and sharpen the knife on Yom Tov. It's a nice sharpener. I have a different one. But you now sharpen the knife on Yom Tov. What you could do is, you could put one knife on the other one and sharpen it one with the other. Because again, this is the same svar we're saying all along, is you're changing from how it's normally done during the weekday. Now, Amar Rav Huna, he qualifies this halach. He says, we didn't learn that it's aser to sharpen the knife on Yom Tov, illa b'mashchezes shel even. It's only if you're sharpening it on a sharpener of stone, which that really sharpens it very well. And again, that looks like as if you're fixing it on a weekday. Mashchezes shel eitz muter. But if, let's say, you're sharpening on a wooden sharpener, then mutter, again, that's not a regular weekday way of how you'd sharpen the knife. Now, that Rabbi Yehuda Mishmuli qualifies on this qualification. It says Hodam at this that you say shall even aser, that if you sharpen on the stone sharpener, it's going to be forbidden. We only said that if you're doing it to sharpen the knife. But let's say you had the knife and it got all the fats congealed in there because you were cutting all that meat, and you're just trying to get it off by putting it onto the sharpener, then mutter is going to be permitted. Now the Gemara is medayik from this teaching. Machlal, the inference is from the fact that Rabbi Yehuda said that the isser of a stone sharpener is only if you're doing it to sharpen it. So the inference is the bishal eitz, that by the wooden one, that means to say that even by the wooden one, to sharpen it would also be mutter. And this that Rav Huna had said that it's asa by the stone one is what the equivalent is mutter by the wooden one. And you tell me that the stone one is only asa when you're doing to sharpen it. Must be the wooden one is even mutter, even if your intention is to sharpen it. Now that's one version. There's a few versions, so don't get confused. That's version number 1. Now Ikkedemasnila, that those who teach this teaching of Rabbi Yehuda, which is the last qualification, again, that says the problem is only lechadita, only when doing the sharpen, not to get rid of the fat, a seifa, on the end of the teaching of Rav Huna. Meaning, the first version was saying it on the shel even one. He was saying it on Rav Huna had said Bishal Eitz Mutter, if you're doing it on the wooden ones, can be permitted. On that, Rabbi Shloimy qualifies, said, hold on, Bishal Eitz Mutter. This day he said that by wooden ones can be permitted. We only said this Nisa, only if you're trying to get rid of the fats. That's what we're saying by the wooden one's permitted. So this is a more stringent interpretation. But to sharpen on the wooden one, that would also be forbidden. So Machlal, the inference says the Gemara, from this teaching of Rabbi Yehuda in this version, the Bishal Evan, that by the stone sharpener, so even to get rid of the fat, even that if that's only your intention, not even trying to sharpen, that would also be forbidden as like a weekday type of activity. That was two versions. Now, those who teach this teaching of Rabbi Yehuda, Amasnitin. The first two versions had Rabbi Yehuda qualifying Rav Huna. Our Mishnah said that you cannot sharpen a knife. And that Rav Huna said it's only by the stone, but by wood permitted. And Rabbi Yehuda had said two versions, either in the Shal Evan or the Shal Eitz, that it's only lechadada, but not lahavasham nanisa. Now there's another version that actually has Rabbi Yehuda going straight on the Mishnah, not on Rav Huna. As the Gemara explains, the Mishnah said, you now go ahead and sharpen a knife on Yom Tiv. Says, we only said this if you're doing it to sharpen it, that's considered tikkun, that's considered fixing it. But if, let's say, you're doing it just to get off the fats, so that's just like washing it off, that would be mutter, that would be permitted. Now, Machlal, the inference is that the other half of the halacha, the Mishnah that said the Gabi Chaverta, that you're allowed to go ahead and put one knife on the other, that even if you're doing it to sharpen the knives, would also be permitted. Now, however, this is version number 4. For those who teach Rabbi Yehuda's teaching on the Sefer of the Mishnah, when the Mishnah said, you can put one knife on top of the other, on that, the Mishnah only says, we only said this, that you'll have to put one knife on the other if you just want to get off the fat. So you could slice it off by scraping one knife on the other one. But if you're doing it to sharpen the knife, then even one knife on the other is going to be forbidden. The inference is the Meshchez is that with a sharpener, that even if you're doing it to remove the fats, is going to be asa. So that concludes those 4 different versions. Now, on that says the Gemara, Man Tana de Mashcheza. So who's the Tana of Mishnah that holds that you now sharpen a knife on Yom Tov? So Mavchizah is a classic halachic dispute regarding the laws of Yom Tov. So Mavchizah says the Lake of Yehuda is not Rabbi Yehuda. Katana learned the Brisa, big machlekes. Tanakama says in ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos. There's no difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos. Tanakama says the only Yom Tov is the same like Shabbos. The only difference is regarding preparing food. Those you're allowed to do malachas for. Yehuda says no. Even preparatory elements of food preparation are going to be permitted. The reason for that is because it says in the pasuk Ya'asa lochem, which he explains lochem means l'chol tzarchechem, for all your needs, and that's even to sharpen the knife. That our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda, because our Mishnah says you're not sharpen the knife. According to Rabbi Yehuda, what do you mean? It's machshir nefesh. You're allowed to do that even on Yom Tov. Now on that Amalei, so he said to him, Amalei Rava Rav Chizda. So Rava said to Rav Chizda, Darshina Mishmecha, they expound in your name, meaning shall we expound in your name? Because Rav Chizda just said this. He said our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda. So should we say in your name halacha Rabbi Yehuda, halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda? Meaning he's inferring from him that Mishnah not like Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Yehuda also going to be mutter. So he says, should we say in your name halacha is Rabbi Yehuda? And they said to him, Yehi Rabba, let it be the will. The Chol Kihani Milam Al Yasa, that all these such beautiful teachings, Tiddush and Mishmei, you should say my name. That yes, it's permitted to go ahead and say and do Machshir Nefesh because Rabbi Yehuda holds that's permitted. The Gemara actually brings a story related to this that Amar of Nechem B'Rei Rabbi Yosef. He says, "Havakaim Nekamei Rava." I was standing in front of Rava, who he's the one that just asked us from Mechizda. Rava cries and continued to Mebeis Ma'avrlis Sakina. He was sharpening a knife. Puma de Dikula on the opening of a basket. Now, I mean, he was passing over the knife, smoothing over the knife over the opening of a basket. And I said to him, what's the master doing? Are you doing it to sharpen the knife? Or maybe you're just trying to get off the fats? Now, he said to me, he said, I'm just getting off the fats. But he said, he says, I was able to tell the he was really doing it to sharpen the knife. Now, so why did he tell them he's only doing it to remove the fats? And this was Rabbi who just heard from Rav Chizda that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda that you're allowed to do hechsher al nefesh, you're allowed to sharpen the knife. Because Ksavi he held, this is what's called in halacha of halacha. Yes, halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. And really every person is allowed to sharpen the knife. But it's what's called the ein moirin. but you don't rule for the public cane like this. Why not? Why don't you rule if it's permitted? Because many times you don't want people to be disgraceful because they're going to sharpen the knife on Yom Tov even though they could have done it from before Yom Tov. Now, all these cases that we let you do malacha on Yom Tov is, for example, let's say you got ruined on Yom Tov, or let's say every Yom Tov you were perturbed and busy, as the Gemara says later on, that even Rabbi Yehuda only lets you do mashiach nefesh that you couldn't have done from before Yom Tov. So though the halacha is you're allowed to sharpen the knife, I asked him, he says, no, I'm just getting rid of the fats, because he didn't want to tell me that you're allowed to. Because although it's really the halacha, but if we're going to tell people, you're allowed to sharpen the knife on Yom Tov, then they're going to come to do it even though they were able to do it from before Yom Tov, and then it's actually not mutter. So therefore it's halacha vein marikim. Similarly, another story, the same idea of Amabaya. Says, says I was in front of the master. He's putting the knife over the lid, the tip of a mill. I said to him, what are you doing with the knife over here? Are you sharpening it? Or just going into the fats? He said to me, let's to get rid of the fats. It says I was able to tell that he was really trying to sharpen the knife. But he held although the Allah is like a beauty, but we don't rule like that. Now, continuing this theme of the knife, so the Gemara says, the following question: Ma'ol haris. What's the halacha that are you allowed to show, let's say in your house, your knife, which meaning are you allowed to show to a butcher? Is a butcher allowed to show sak in the knife, l'chacham, to the chacham b'yom tov and yom tov, to check it out? Meaning, chachamim made a requirement for all butchers to show their knives to the chacham before he's going to shecht any animal. So shaila was, are you allowed to show your chalaf, you're allowed to show your butcher knife to the chacham on yom tov? What's the question? Does it look like uvdi d'chayil? Because what's called av shemilsa, which are another generic term that we have, that it's a making a rash where it looks like, what are you taking it to sell in the marketplace? Or no, it's not such a problem with showing the chalaf. So Rav Mori Bereder business shari says permitted. Rabban Nasi Rabban says it's forbidden. Now Rav Yosef Amei says Tamachacham roya la'atzmai. He's allowed to see it himself in his own house, his own knife, and that's not a problem because that's not av shemilsa. He's doing it in his own house. And then what he can do is he can lend his knife to others. So though you're not allowed to come according to one mandam and show your chalaf to the Talmid Chacham, if the Talmid Chacham wants to be helpful, what he could do is that he could look at his own knife and then he could lend it to other people and they could use a pre-checked knife from the Talmid Chacham, because to show it to the Chacham is like an av shemilsa. It's like a uvdin d'chayil. Another teaching on the same topic from Rav Yosef, he says saken she'amda, a knife that stopped being sharp. It doesn't cut well anymore, but it's not nifgam. It's not like dented. It's not like ruined. It's just not sharp anymore. So mutlachad b'yom tov. So that's a Rav Yosef. You're allowed to sharpen that on Yom Tov. Meaning, as Rashi explains, although yesterday and the day before it already started obviously getting ruined, it's not overnight that suddenly the knife doesn't cut anymore. But the guy didn't have to entertain yesterday, where he thought, I'm not going to need to sharpen it. Because in contrast, if it was nifgam yesterday, if it got mamish dented, then you wouldn't be able to sharpen that on Yom Tov, because you knew about this already at Yom Tov. You should have done it from before Yom Tov. But if it stopped cutting so well, okay. It's not something that you thought it's mamish not going to cut anymore. Suddenly Shabbos, you go, the wife's looking, this doesn't cut anymore. Right? So then you're allowed to sharpen it on Yom Tov. Now, v'hani miluhu, but this is only talking about if the paska agav durka, that you will be able to cut it if you push really hard. But if, let's say, it wouldn't cut at all, again, then you're not sharpen it. Rashi says, because that would be tirchi yisera. That would be a big tircha to really, you have to really sharpen it well. It's only if it would do, but not so great, then you're allowed to sharpen that on Yom Tov, which obviously is a lot of halacha concepts over here of you, because machshir chol nefesh, you already should have done from before Yom Tov, also about tirchi yisera. Now the Gemara continues regarding this machlokes that we had regarding of machshir chol nefesh. So Darash Rav Chizda expounded. Bitem some say it's Rav Yosef that he expounded. Echad sakin shenifkama. Whether if it's a knife that became dented, got ruined, vechad shapucha nirtzam, or whether regarding a spit, you make the shish kebab on a spit, that stick that became ruined on Yom Tov where the tip, the end of it broke, or vechad grifas tana b'kiram b'Yom Tov, whether shoveling out the oven and the stove on Yom Tov, where let's say part of the wall fell into the oven, which you didn't know about from before Yom Tov. We come to machlokes, meaning this is part of their machlokes, where from their machlokes we can learn that these are also from machshir oichel nefesh, and it would be the same thing. It's not part of the food preparation itself. It's part of something that prepares the food, and you want to prepare that thing. That is included. The Tanakh in the price, as we mentioned on Nomen Aleph, in Ben Yom Tov L'Shabbos. Tanakh holds no difference in the laws of Yom Tov L'Shabbos. Only regarding for malacha for the food itself. Yehuda says no, even machshir nefesh can be permitted, and these things are machshir nefesh, the knife, the spit, the oven. So I think one explains and clarifies, says, my time in the Tanakh Kama, what's the reason of the Tanakh Kama that says hechsher echel nefesh is forbidden? It's only echel nefesh itself, because Amakar the pasuk says in Shemais, it says in the pasuk hu levade, this alone itself, ya'as lechem, you should do for you, which it says there in the pasuk, which is lechol nefesh, asher echel chol nefesh, that what you're eating. Now the word who is telling you who, it's a miyut, it's excluding it, but not its preparatory utensils. If you that he holds that machshir chol nefesh is permitted, we would say a source, because the Makar the pasuk says lochem for you. Lochem means lochem for all you need, which is my knife, my spit, my oven. All those are also permitted to do malacha Yom Tov. So the Gemara asks on each one regarding the source of the other one. Now the Tanakh Kama hoksib lochem, it says lochem. What does it do? It doesn't include lechol tzachechem. He would tell you no. Lochem is actually a miyut. When saying for you, it's lechem lo lanachem, for you and not for the Gentiles. You now do malacha avochel nefesh for a good. Now says now the other mandam Rabbi Yehuda also who it says who isn't that coming to exclude, like Tanakh says hechsher echel nefesh? How is he including hechsher echel nefesh? He would tell you no, ksiv hu b'ksiv lechem. You're right. It says a miyut of who, but it says lechem, which is a ribui of including all those things. So what does he do with that? He says, well, gosh, not difficult. It depends when. Who is telling you if you could have done this sharpening the knife before Yom Tov, who is coming to exclude and say you cannot do that on Yom Tov? Kan over here it says lachem, which is a ribui, is machshin she'ev shlas Yom Tov, but you couldn't have done it before Yom Tov. That you're allowed to do on Yom Tov, and that's how Rabbi resolves both the who and the lachem. Now, Amr Rabbi Yehuda Meshmul, the Gemara continues in this halach. He said shapucha nirtzak, which we mentioned before, the spit that people stepped on, it got bent. Now it didn't break, but it got bent. Asla sakim Yom Tov. Now I'll fix it on Yom Tov because you could use it as it is. And like Rashi says, tircha d'lei tzarchu, it's an unnecessary tircha, and therefore you're not to go ahead and fix that on Yom Tov. So the Gemara says pshita, obviously. Why would you be allowed to do it? So the Gemara does not say even though that you could fix it, you could straighten it out with your hands. You don't have to hit it with a hammer. Even so, you're not fixed it on Yom Tov. Another teacher, Rabbi Meshmul, he says shaput shetzoli bevasa, regarding a spit that was used to roast meat on it on Yom Tov. After you finished, also talta b'Yom Tov. Once you finished roasting it, you're not allowed to move it on Yom Tov because now it's already disgusted. When it's dirty, everyone washes their pit, their spit, all the things. Now it's already disgusting. So it's muktzah because you already did tzarech Yom Tov. The moment you finish roasting, you're not allowed to move it on Yom Tov. Now, however, Rav Adabar Abba Amar Rav Malkiah, he says, and Rav Malkiah disagrees. He says not true. He says Shoimtai, what you could do is you could remove it right away by dragging it, what's called tilta min atzad. So you're not moving it in a regular way, you can move it in an indirect way, until you remove it from in front of you, and you could put it into the corner. So you can't move it in a regular way, but it's not like the Rabbi Yehuda Meshmul says that you have to mamish drop it like a hot cake. Oh, you could drag it in an indirect way. It's called tilta min atzad and put it into the corner. Now, but the Gemara makes an important qualification. He says, but it's only if it has an olive size of meat on that pit. So because, and some Rishonim take out the word kizayis, as long as it has some meat on it, so then it's not considered muktzah because of that meat on it, then you'll be able to move it. Now, a third opinion, however, Rabbi Shloimy says, no, even if there's no meat on it, mutal tatloi, you're totally allowed to move it and remove it. Why? So Rashi says, as the Gemara is going to explain, because that people shouldn't get harmed from a spit, a pointy stick. Just like you have a thorn in the public domain. You're allowed to move it less than Dalet Amas at a time until you move it to the ends of Rosh Hashanah so that people shouldn't get harmed, which overrides the Issur Rabbanan of moving less than Dalet Amas. Here also, it's just muktzah, which is Issur Rabbanan. You're allowed to move the spit so that someone shouldn't get harmed, and even without meat on it, not even min atzad, and that you're allowed to move it. Now, parenthetical, Amr Rav Chida Bereid of Iki says the following three halachas: shapud, the spit, which we can explain each one of these, and shfachis, and the maidservants. begumais, and the pores are all them are Rav Malkiyah, and not Rav Malkiyah. Now, because their names are very similar, so people would confuse the teachings of one with the other. So they put a siman to the order of their teachings to know who said what. So he said that Shapud was the one that we had just said, which was regarding Tiltum and Atzad. He says you're allowed to move it to the corner if you move it in the indirect way. So these three teachings are all Rav Malkiah. What's the second teaching? So Shvachas Rashi says in Mishnah Mesechtes Ksubas that Rebbe Elazar says that even if a woman brings into the marriage 100 maidservants, you still could force her to work with wool. Because what's famous is Batala, sitting around doing nothing, is Mevil Deizima, brings to immorality. Now, it was Rav Malkiah who said the name of Rebbe Elazar that teaching. So to Gumais, the third one was actually a Amoroic teaching. It wasn't said in regards to a Mishnah. With regards to 2 pubic hairs, which makes someone an adult. That lets you find 2 pores of where hairs would be. Even if there's no follicles of hair, she's considered an adult because the pores only come if there's hairs, it's just that it fell out. So those 3 teachings of Shapud and Shvaches and Gumais are all Rav Malkiyah, but Balirius, which are the locks of hairs, which that refers to a Mishnah Mesechtes of Zara, which was in regards to a Bitzah, that this teaching of Malki was explaining a Bitzah, because the Bitzah they were saying a Kuti, a Gentile who is having his hair cut from Yisrael, once he comes to the Bloirius, which is his ponytail, he has to stop cutting, because the Kuti, when he cuts his hair, he leaves that for the Avodah Zarah. So on that, the Gemara is saying how much before you get to the Bloirius you have to let go. Malki said 3 finger breadths in every direction, all around that, you're not allowed to touch. Because if you're going to cut up until the Blairis, comes out that you left the ponytail and you've really fixed his pony for Avodah Zarah. So you can't even cut near that so that you're not leaving it for that Avodah Zarah. And the next halacha was Efer Mikla, which is ashes from an oven, which is an Amoraic teaching, Mesechtes Makos, was Rav Malkiah said, the person not allowed to put ashes on his wound, because it's going to look like a tattoo on his wound. And the third halacha was a gvina, which that halacha of cheese was explaining a Mishnah in Masechta Avodah Zarah, which the Mishnah said that cheese of the Gentiles forbidden, and that Rav Malkiah said because they would actually smooth out the surface of their cheese with the fats of chazer, of swine, so therefore he says that their cheeses are forbidden. All those are Rav Malkiah. That's what Rav Chinna Bered of Ikka says. However, Rav Papa, he actually has a slightly different version. He says that masnitin umasnita Rav Malkiah, whenever you have an explanation of a Mishnah or Bryce, it's Rav Malkiah, Shmaitzer Rav Malkiah, an Amoraic teaching, a self-standing Amoraic teaching is Rav Malkiah. And B'samanech, and the manic to remember this is masnitin Malkasa. The Mishnah is the queen, which that's referring to Rav Malkiah, in contrast to Rav Malkiah, who he's teaching are always Amoraic teachings. And says, what's the difference between this version of the first one of Rav Chinna Bered of Ikka and the second version of Rav Papa? The one difference is Ikbenai Shlachis is the halacha of the maidservants, because that's explaining a Mishnah, and Rav Chinna had said that it was Rav Malkiah, and that Rav Papa would say, no, it wasn't Rav Malkiah, because any explanation of a Mishnah or a Braisa was Rav Malkiah who explained it. But the Amoraic teaching that you said the name of Rav Malkiah, like the Shapur, the Spit, and the Gumas, yeah, that was Rav Malkiah. The one difference is that it's not Rav Malkiah, which Rav Malkiah is that of the Shvachis. One more small little Mishnah and Gemara, continuing regarding meat on Yom Tiv, the Mishnah says, Lo yema adam latavach, a person should not tell a butcher, shokali bedin basar. Do me a favor, weigh for me a dinner's worth of meat, where you're not allowed to mention, like we said, monies on Yom Tiv. Aval sheichet, but what he could do is, he could shech without making up a price, and then he could just divide amongst them and do it like that. Which the Gemara says, heicha of it. Let's say a person doesn't want to buy the whole animal. Not even a half, not a third, not a quarter. He only knows how much money he has. He doesn't know what size piece. He wants a dinner's worth or 2 dinners worth. So then what should he tell him then? Because he doesn't know he can't mention monies. So the Gemara, like we have, as the Gemara continues to talk about Chav Tesam and Aleph, the Besura Amri in Surah, they would say that they used to say to the butcher, give me tarta upalgu tarta, a tarta or half of a tarta. Similarly, benorish amri, in the place norish, they would say chelka, half, upalgu chelka, or half of the chelka. But b'dis amri, and from this they would say uzia, upalgu uzia, or half of the uzia, benar pekoid, and masmachasa. And these two places, amri, they would say river, give me river, upalgu river, or half of the river. Meaning, as Rashi explains, the butchers, they had certain pieces of meat that were equal from the animals, that certain cuts of meat that they had a set price for them. And in Suri they would call it tarta, in Neresh they would call it chelkim, but these are called uzia, and Arpukah they would call it riva. But again, there was the $10 piece and 20, but it had names. So you didn't have to mention the price. You wanted the $10 cut of meat, you said give me the uzia, or whatever this net, and that's a way how you could go ahead and know how much you're spending without mentioning monies on Yom Tov. Thank you to Anytime for hosting us.